Where did you get the money for this party? Did you take out another loan? My son-in-law laughed loudly at my birthday party when my card was declined. I'll lend you a couple thousand, he said. I remained silent, but the waiter shocked everyone. We owe him $1 million. The glass fell from the son-in-law's hands, and the truth exploded. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you are listening in the comments. The tire tracks cut deep into my freshly seeded lawn like scars. 2 parallel grooves where I'd scattered premium grass seed just last weekend. The soil dark and exposed beneath Olan's Honda Civic. I stood there holding my watering hose, watching water drip onto my boots while anger built slowly in my chest. Olan emerged from my daughter's house carrying a toolbox, his baseball cap pulled low. He walked past his car without a glance at the damage, keys jangling in his hand. "Excuse me." I kept my voice level, measured. "Could you park on the street next time? You've driven over the new grass." He stopped, turned. His expression shifted from casual dismissal to something harder. "What?" "The lawn." I gestured toward the tire tracks. "I just seeded it. This is my wife's father's house." He emphasized each word like I'd forgotten where I lived. "I park wherever I need to." The condescension hit me like cold water. "Actually, it's my house, and I'm asking politely." "Listen, old man." Olan stepped closer, his voice dropping. "Effie told me about your little financial situation. Maybe worry less about grass and more about keeping this place." My grip tightened on the hose. "Financial situation? What had my daughter said?" "I don't know what you mean." "Sure you don't." His smile was thin, calculating. "Must be nice, pretending you own something when everyone knows you're living on credit." Heat flooded my face. Living on credit? I'd paid off this house 15 years ago, built a modest but solid retirement portfolio through careful investing. What stories had been spreading? "You're mistaken." "Am I?" He took another step forward. "Because from where I stand, you're just a broke old guy trying to act important." The front door opened. Effie appeared, her face flushed with embarrassment. She wore her paint-stained work clothes, dark hair pulled back hastily. "Dad? Olan? What's going on?" "Your father's having issues with where I park," Olan said, not breaking eye contact with me. "Seems he thinks he can tell me what to do." Effie looked between us, her expression pained. "Dad, maybe we could just—" "No, maybe about it." I kept my voice steady despite the rage building inside. "This is my property. Basic respect isn't too much to ask." Olan laughed, the sound sharp and ugly. "Respect? From someone who can barely afford utilities? That's enough." Effie stepped between us, but her eyes avoided mine. "Olan, just move the car. Dad, let's talk inside." But Olan wasn't finished. He leaned around my daughter, pointing at me. "You want respect? Start by being honest about what you really are." Something cold settled in my stomach. The way Effie shifted her weight, the way she still wouldn't look at me directly. She knew something. Whatever lies Olan was spreading, they'd reached her ears. "Get off my property." The words came out quieter than I intended, but clear enough. "Gladly." Olan clicked his remote, and his car beeped. "Come on, Effie. Let your dad enjoy his grass." He slid behind the wheel, reversed deliberately over the seated area again, then roared down the street. Effie stood on my porch, wrapping her arms around herself. "Dad, I should go. We'll talk later, okay?" She hurried to her own car without waiting for an answer. I watched her taillights disappear around the corner, then stood alone in my driveway, water still running from the forgotten hose in my hand. The tire tracks seemed deeper now, more permanent, like wounds that wouldn't heal. Monday morning arrived gray and drizzling, typical Seattle spring weather that matched my mood. I sat at my kitchen table with coffee growing cold, staring at my phone screen, 5 unanswered calls to Effie since yesterday. Each ring echoing into voicemail felt like another small betrayal. I tried her number again, straight to voicemail. "Hi, you've reached Effie. Leave a message and I'll get back to you." The cheerful recording mocked me. I set the phone down and looked out my kitchen window at the scarred lawn. The tire tracks had filled with rainwater overnight, creating muddy puddles where green shoots should have been emerging. What financial situation had Olan meant? What had my daughter told him about me? The doorbell interrupted my brooding. Through the peephole, I saw Wilma Mortimer from 3 houses down, holding a covered dish and shifting nervously from foot to foot. "Good morning, Rupert." Her smile seemed forced as I opened the door. "I brought you some banana bread. Thought you might enjoy it." Wilma rarely visited without occasion. Her timing felt suspect, but I invited her in anyway. She settled at my kitchen table, glancing around with the careful attention of someone gathering information. "Coffee?" I offered. "That would be lovely." She unwrapped her banana bread with exaggerated care. "I hope you don't mind me stopping by. I've been concerned." "Concerned about what?" "Well," she hesitated, cutting the bread into precise slices. "Harold and I were talking with the Sherwoods yesterday. They mentioned some things." My stomach tightened. The Sherwoods lived directly across from me. Prime position for neighborhood gossip. "What kind of things?" Wilma's discomfort was obvious. She avoided my eyes, focusing intently on arranging bread slices. "They said your son-in-law mentioned you were having some financial difficulties, living on credit, struggling with mortgage payments." The words hit like physical blows. I gripped my coffee mug to keep my hands steady. "He said that?" Harold didn't want to repeat it, but... She finally looked at me, her expression mixing pity with curiosity. "Are you managing okay, Rupert? Because if you need help, the church has programs." "I don't need help." The sharpness in my voice made her flinch. "I'm financially stable, very stable." Of course. She backpedaled quickly. "I'm sure there's been some misunderstanding. You know how stories get twisted." But the damage was spreading. I could see it in her eyes, the doubt creeping in. If Olan had convinced my own neighbors I was struggling, what other lies had he planted? "What exactly did the Sherwoods say?" Wilma fidgeted with her wedding ring. "They mentioned something about you borrowing money for house repairs, and that your daughter was worried about your pride preventing you from accepting family help." Each word felt calculated to humiliate. Olan had crafted this story carefully, mixing enough believable details to make it stick. The house did need minor repairs. Every older home did. But I'd been planning to handle them myself, with money I'd saved specifically for maintenance. "Did they say anything else?" "Just that your son-in-law seemed very concerned about the family situation." Her voice grew smaller. "He apparently told them he was trying to help, but you were being stubborn about accepting support." Brilliant! Olan had cast himself as the generous provider, while painting me as a proud but failing patriarch. No wonder Effie had avoided my calls. She probably believed I was too embarrassed to discuss my supposed financial crisis. I forced myself to stay calm, to respond carefully. "I appreciate your concern, Wilma, but I assure you there's been a significant misunderstanding." She nodded too quickly, clearly uncomfortable with the conversation's direction. "I'm sure that's right. These things always get blown out of proportion." We finished our coffee in strained silence. After she left, I stood in my kitchen processing the full scope of what Olan had done. This wasn't just about a damaged lawn or personal disrespect. He was systematically destroying my reputation, isolating me from my community and family. The phone sat silent on my table. Effie still hadn't returned my calls. Tuesday evening found me walking the familiar path along Lake Union, the Seattle skyline reflecting in the dark water. I needed space to think, away from the house where Olan's lies seemed to echo in every room. The gentle lap of waves against the shoreline provided rhythm for my churning thoughts. Ellen would have known what to do. My wife had possessed an intuitive understanding of people that I'd always envied. She could read between lines, anticipate motivations, see through false pretenses with surgical precision. I settled on our old bench, the one where we'd sat countless evenings discussing everything from Effie's school troubles to retirement plans. The metal felt cold through my jacket, but the familiar spot brought clarity I desperately needed. "Never let anyone diminish your dignity, Rupert." Ellen's voice echoed across the years. She'd said that during my early banking career, when a colleague had tried to undermine my credibility with clients, respond with truth, not emotion. Let your character speak louder than their accusations. Sound advice then. Even better advice now. I watched a seaplane taxi across the water, its engines growing distant. Olan's strategy was becoming clear. He couldn't compete with me intellectually or financially, so he'd chosen to destroy my foundation instead. Make me appear weak, desperate, irrelevant. Then position himself as the family's true provider and protector. But why? What drove this need to diminish me? Insecurity, probably. A man confident in his own worth doesn't need to tear others down. Olan saw me as a threat to his position in Effie's life, her respect, her loyalty. Instead of earning those things honestly, he'd decided to steal them through deception. The realization brought cold anger, but also strategic thinking. Direct confrontation would play into his hands. He wanted me angry, reactive, appearing unstable. That would validate his narrative about my declining capabilities. What if I did the opposite? The idea formed slowly, like dawn breaking over the Olympic mountains. Instead of defending against his lies, I could create a situation where truth emerged naturally, a setting where my actual character and circumstances became obvious to everyone who mattered. My 70th birthday was next month. I'd been dreading it, another milestone marking time's passage. But maybe it could serve a different purpose. A celebration, nothing elaborate but meaningful. Good food, careful guest list, elegant setting. The kind of gathering that required both planning skills and financial resources, things Olan claimed I lacked. I could invite the Sherwoods, let them see firsthand how financially struggling people actually lived. Include colleagues from my banking days who knew my real situation. Create an environment where lies withered under observation. Most importantly, I could watch how Effie and Olan behaved when surrounded by truth. Would my daughter finally see her husband's deception? Or had his manipulation run too deep? The plan felt right, strategic rather than emotional. Ellen would approve. Fairy horns echoed across the water as I stood to leave. The city lights were coming alive. Pike Place Market's neon signs visible in the distance. Seattle at its most beautiful, prosperous, and confident. I belonged to this city, had helped build its financial foundation during my career. Olan's small lies couldn't diminish that reality. Walking home, I felt something I hadn't experienced since Saturday's confrontation. Control. Instead of reacting to Olan's moves, I would make my own, create the conditions where truth prevailed over fiction. The birthday party would be perfect, elegant enough to demonstrate my actual circumstances, intimate enough to reveal everyone's true character. A test of loyalty disguised as celebration. By the time I reached my house, the tire tracks on my lawn looked less like scars and more like temporary damage. Grass would grow back. Reputations could be restored. Family relationships would either heal or reveal themselves as permanently broken. Either way, I would finally know where I stood. Wednesday morning found me downtown, examining invitation options with the methodical attention I'd once applied to loan portfolios. The stationery store's cream paper felt substantial between my fingers, its weight suggesting quality without ostentation. Gold embossing caught the fluorescent light just right, elegant but not flashy. This one, I told the clerk, selecting ivory cardstock with subtle texture, professional grade, the kind of material that spoke quietly of standards. Back home, I spread the invitations across my dining table like investment documents requiring careful review. My fountain pen, the same Mont Blanc Ellen had given me for our 20th anniversary, moved across each card with deliberate precision. Proper penmanship mattered. Each guest deserved personal attention. The Sherwoods received the first invitation. They'd heard Olan's stories. Now they'd witness reality. Noble Patterson, my former colleague from Pacific Northwest Bank, got the second. He understood both my professional background and current financial stability. Wilma, despite her unfortunate timing with gossip, had shown genuine concern. She earned inclusion. Tyler Morrison answered on the second ring when I called Pacific Edge. Morrison speaking. Tyler, this is Rupert Hansen, Jim Morrison's friend. Oh, Mr. Hansen, Dad mentioned you might call. How can I help you? His voice carried the polished professionalism of someone who'd grown up in the restaurant business. Jim had raised him well. I'd like to book your private dining room for Saturday evening, April 19th, 8 guests. Let me check availability. I heard keyboard clicks. Yes, we can accommodate that. Would you prefer the sunset view or the harbor view? Sunset, please. Window table if possible. Visibility mattered. Let the neighbors see how struggling people celebrated. Absolutely. Any dietary restrictions I should know about? Nothing specific. I trust your chef's judgment for a spring menu. Perfect. We'll prepare something special. Dad always speaks highly of you, Mr. Hansen. He'll be pleased to hear you chose us for your celebration. The warmth in his voice reminded me why I'd selected this restaurant. Relationships built over decades of mutual respect. Something Olan wouldn't understand. After hanging up, I reviewed my guest list one final time. 8 people, carefully chosen. Some knew my history, others only Olan's fiction. The mix would create natural conversation about my circumstances without appearing contrived. Each invitation received the same careful attention. My handwriting remained steady, each address perfectly centered. Muscle memory from years of signing documents, authorizing transactions, building trust through attention to detail. The final invitation bore Effie's name and downtown address. This one required personal delivery. I sealed it with particular care, knowing it might determine whether my plan succeeded or failed entirely. Everything depended on her attendance, and Olan's predictable response to being publicly evaluated. The stack of completed invitations felt weightier than their actual mass. 8 cards representing 8 witnesses to whatever truth emerged Saturday evening. Some would see vindication of my character. Others might witness my family's complete dissolution. Either outcome would end the uncertainty. Standing at my dining room window, I looked out at the damaged lawn where this confrontation had begun. The tire tracks remained visible, but new grass shoots were emerging around the edges. Recovery was possible, given proper care and time. Saturday would reveal whether the same held true for family relationships, damaged by lies and disrespect. I picked up Effie's invitation and headed for my car. Time to deliver the most important message of all. Thursday afternoon, traffic moved sluggishly through downtown Seattle as I drove toward Effie's apartment near Pike Place Market. Fresh freesia flowers sat beside me on the passenger seat, her favorite since childhood. A small peace offering despite everything that had happened. Her building occupied a converted warehouse, all exposed brick and industrial windows, the kind of modern urban space that appealed to graphic designers and young professionals. I climbed 3 flights of stairs, invitation envelope in one hand, flowers in the other. Effie opened the door before I finished knocking. Her face cycled through surprise, guilt, and something approaching relief. "Dad? What are you doing here?" "Brought you something." I offered the freesia. "And this." The invitation followed. She accepted both awkwardly, stepping aside to let me enter. The apartment reflected her artistic sensibilities. Clean lines, dramatic lighting, a wall covered with her design work. Successful and sophisticated. Nothing like the struggling household Olan had described to the neighbors. "Olan!" she called toward the living room. "Dad's here." From around the corner came the sound of a beer can opening, followed by Olan's voice. "Yeah? What's he want?" He appeared wearing gym shorts and a tank top, television remote still in his hand. Made no effort to greet me or acknowledge my presence beyond a dismissive glance. "I'm hosting a birthday dinner Saturday evening," I said, addressing Effie. "I hope you'll both attend." She opened the invitation, reading quickly. Her expression grew troubled. "Saturday? That's really short notice, Dad." "Yeah, we've got plans," Olan interjected, settling back onto his couch. "Bowling league, important match." I looked directly at him. "The invitation says 7 o'clock. Most bowling leagues start later." "This one's different." He didn't bother looking up from his television. "All-day tournament. Can't miss it." Effie shot him a sharp look. "You never mentioned an all-day tournament." "Must have forgot to mention it." His tone suggested the conversation was over. The lie hung in the air between us. Effie knew it was fabricated. I could see it in her expression. But she also knew challenging him meant choosing sides in our escalating conflict. "Maybe we could stop by after bowling," she suggested diplomatically. "Nah." Olan took a long drink from his beer. "Gonna be exhausted. Big match like that takes everything out of you." His dismissal was calculated insult, not schedule conflict. We all understood that. But direct confrontation would only escalate the situation. "I understand," I said carefully. "Though I should mention it's at Pacific Edge. Tyler Morrison reserved their private dining room specially." Effie's eyebrows rose slightly. Pacific Edge wasn't an inexpensive restaurant. The private dining room suggested both financial capability and social connections, details that contradicted every story Olan had spread about my circumstances. "Fancy place," Olan commented, still not looking at me. "Must be spending your daughter's inheritance on the high life." The accusation hit its mark. Effie flinched visibly. "Actually," I replied evenly, It's being paid for with my own resources, money I earned through careful investment and financial planning. Now Olan looked at me directly. Sure it is. The reservation includes 8 guests, colleagues from my banking days, neighbors, family friends, people who know my actual financial situation. Understanding flickered in his eyes. This wasn't just dinner. It was a public presentation of facts that contradicted his carefully constructed narrative. Look, old man, I told you we're busy. Olan, Effie's voice carried warning. Dad's trying to include us in something important. Important to who? Him? What about what's important to me? The territorial challenge was unmistakable. He was forcing her to choose between father and husband, publicly and definitively. Effie looked between us, trapped by competing loyalties and her own complicity in the situation. She knew the truth about my finances, but had allowed Olan's lies to spread unchallenged. Now that silence was demanding a price. Maybe, she started carefully, maybe we could work something out, if the tournament finishes early enough. Olan's expression darkened. I said we're busy. And I heard you. She faced him directly. But this is my father's 70th birthday. The statement carried implications neither man could ignore. She was establishing priorities, asserting that family obligations outweighed bowling leagues, real or imagined. After a long moment, Olan shrugged. Fine. If we finish early, we'll swing by. But don't expect us to stay long. It was grudging surrender disguised as compromise. He would attend, but only to demonstrate his dominance through strategic rudeness in front of my guests. Perfect. Thank you both, I said formally. 7 o'clock at Pacific Edge. I look forward to seeing you there. Effie walked me to the door, her movement stiff with residual tension. Dad, I'm sorry about... No apologies necessary. I kissed her forehead. See you Saturday. Walking back to my car, I felt the satisfaction of pieces falling into place. Olan would attend, driven by the same insecurity that had started this entire confrontation. He couldn't resist the opportunity to humiliate me in front of my carefully selected witnesses. He had no idea he was walking into a trap of his own making. Saturday evening's golden light streamed through Pacific Edge's panoramic windows as I arrived 30 minutes early. The private dining room overlooked Elliott Bay, Seattle's skyline, providing elegant backdrop for what promised to be either vindication or disaster. Tyler had exceeded expectations. The table gleamed with crisp linens and polished silverware, 8 place settings arranged with military precision. Fresh orchids created centerpieces that whispered sophistication without shouting expense. Everything looks perfect, I told him, as he made final adjustments to the wine glasses. Dad would expect nothing less for one of his oldest friends. Tyler's smile carried genuine warmth. The halibut is exceptional tonight. Chef's recommendation for your celebration. Noble Patterson arrived first, impeccably dressed in the Navy suit he'd worn to board meetings throughout our banking careers. His handshake conveyed both friendship and assessment. He understood this dinner carried significance beyond birthday celebration. Rupert, his greeting was warm but watchful. Beautiful setting, very you. Wilma appeared next, clearly having invested considerable effort in her appearance. Her burgundy dress and carefully styled hair suggested she grasped the evening's importance, even if she didn't fully understand its purpose. Such an elegant restaurant! She surveyed the room with obvious delight. I had no idea you knew Tyler Morrison personally. The Sherwoods arrived together, Harold straightening his tie nervously, while Martha clutched her purse like protective armor. They'd heard Olan's stories about my financial struggles. Now they found themselves in an upscale restaurant, guests at a private dinner that contradicted everything they'd been told. Rupert, Harold managed, shaking my hand. This is quite something. Thoughtful of you to invite us, Martha added, her tone suggesting confusion rather than gratitude. Alma Fletcher, my neighbor from 2 doors down, swept in wearing dramatic jewelry that caught the restaurant's ambient lighting. She'd witnessed Saturday's lawn confrontation from her kitchen window. Tonight offered her front row seats for its resolution. What a magnificent view, she declared, examining the harbor vista. I bet dinner here costs more than most people spend in a week. The observation wasn't entirely innocent. Everyone was calculating, measuring my apparent financial capability against Olan's narrative of poverty and desperation. By 7:15, 6 guests occupied 7 of 8 chairs. The two empty seats, Effie's and Olan's, drew increasingly obvious glances. "I'm sure they'll be here soon," I assured everyone, though concern was building in my chest. Olan's absence was predictable, but Effie's lateness suggested something more troubling. Noble checked his watch discreetly. "Traffic can be challenging downtown on Saturday evenings." "Of course," Wilma agreed, though her expression suggested different thoughts. "Young people today have such busy schedules." The implicit criticism stung. My daughter's absence was becoming social embarrassment, exactly what Olan had intended. Public demonstration that I couldn't control my own family, couldn't command basic respect from my closest relationships. Tyler appeared at my elbow. "Should we wait a bit longer, or would you prefer to begin?" All eyes turned toward me. The question carried weight beyond dinner timing. Would I allow missing family members to dictate the evening's rhythm, or would I proceed with dignity despite their disrespect? "Let's give them 15 more minutes," I decided. "Then we'll begin." Martha Sherwood leaned toward her husband, whispering something that made him nod grimly. Other conversations grew quieter, more strained. Everyone understood they were witnessing family dysfunction disguised as birthday celebration. Alma studied the empty chairs with theatrical concern. "I hope nothing's wrong, emergency or illness." "I'm sure there's a reasonable explanation," Noble said diplomatically, though his banker's training showed in his careful neutrality. The minutes stretched like hours. Other restaurant patrons glanced toward our table, clearly wondering about the delayed celebration and empty seats. Staff moved efficiently around us, maintaining professional courtesy while managing an increasingly awkward situation. At 7:35, I stood. "Let's begin." Tyler signaled his team, and wine service commenced with practiced efficiency. Glasses filled with Oregon Pinot Gris, conversations resumed forced normalcy, and my 70th birthday dinner officially began, despite two conspicuous absences that spoke louder than any words could. Appetizers had arrived 15 minutes earlier when the dining room door slammed open with violent force. Every conversation stopped, every head turned. Olan stood in the doorway like a conquering general, beer bottle raised in his right hand, satisfied grin spreading across his flushed face. "Sorry we're late." His voice boomed across the intimate space, too loud for the refined atmosphere. "Had some important business to handle." Effie appeared behind him, her face burning with mortification. She tugged at his jacket sleeve, whispering urgent words I couldn't hear from across the room. He shook her off dismissively. Tyler appeared instantly, professional composure intact, despite the obvious protocol breach. "Sir, I'm afraid we don't allow outside beverages." "Relax, kid." Olan brushed past him, heading toward our table with unsteady confidence. "We'll make it quick." The beer bottle caught the restaurant's soft lighting as he navigated between tables, other diners staring at the crude intrusion into their elegant evening. Effie followed 3 steps behind, her attempts at damage control growing more desperate with each awkward moment. Noble's fork froze halfway to his mouth. Wilma's wine glass remained suspended in air. The Sherwoods exchanged meaningful glances that spoke volumes about their opinion of my son-in-law's entrance strategy. "Rupert," Olan declared, reaching our table. "Miss me?" I stood slowly, every movement controlled and deliberate. "Olan, Effie, I'm glad you could make it." My daughter slid into her chair with practiced efficiency, trying to minimize her profile in the social disaster unfolding around her. Her eyes met mine briefly, a flash of apology mixed with helpless embarrassment. Olan remained standing, surveying the table like territory he'd successfully conquered. Premium wine glasses, elegant place settings, half-finished gourmet appetizers. The evidence of my financial capabilities surrounded him, but his intoxicated confidence prevented recognition. "Fancy setup you got here, old man?" He settled into his chair with deliberate casualness, beer bottle clinking against fine crystal. "Must have cost you a fortune." Tyler approached diplomatically. "Could I perhaps take that bottle for you? We have an excellent wine selection." "Nah, I'm good." Olan took a long drink, establishing territorial dominance. "Brought my own entertainment." The violation of basic restaurant etiquette rippled through our social circle like dropped stone in still water. Alma Fletcher's eyebrows disappeared into her hairline. Noble cleared his throat diplomatically. The Sherwoods studied their plates with fascination. "Would you like to see menus?" Tyler tried again, maintaining professional courtesy despite obvious discomfort. Sure, whatever. Olan's attention had shifted to the panoramic harbor view. Nice windows. You can see everything from up here, including other diners who were now openly staring at our table's disruption. Conversations at nearby tables had grown quieter, patrons straining to overhear the family drama unfolding in their midst. Effie reached across the table, her voice barely audible. Dad, I'm so sorry about nothing to apologize for. I resumed my seat, signaling continued normalcy despite chaos. We were just discussing Noble's retirement plans. The diplomatic lie allowed everyone to breathe slightly easier. Noble picked up the conversational thread gratefully, sharing stories about his new grandchildren. Wilma contributed anecdotes about neighborhood changes. Slowly, cautiously, social momentum resumed, but Olan's presence dominated the space like storm clouds gathering overhead. He drank steadily, surveyed the room possessively, and radiated satisfaction at having successfully disrupted our refined gathering. Every gesture screamed territorial victory. Tyler delivered menus with professional grace, taking drink orders despite the obvious tension. Effie requested coffee instead of wine, recognizing her husband's condition required designated driver responsibilities. 20 minutes passed in strained normalcy. Conversations proceeded around safe topics while everyone processed the evening's fundamental shift. What had begun as elegant birthday celebration had transformed into uncomfortable social endurance test. Olan finished his imported beer, set the empty bottle prominently on the white tablecloth, and looked around the table with growing confidence. His entrance had succeeded exactly as planned, maximum disruption with plausible deniability. He was just getting started. Main courses arrived with Tyler's usual precision, but Olan had consumed 2 glasses of wine on top of whatever he'd finished before arrival. His movements grew looser, more territorial, his voice carrying further across the dining room. You know what? He pushed back from the table suddenly, wine glass in hand. I think this calls for a toast. Effie's fork clattered against her plate. Olan, maybe we should just... Nah, this is perfect timing. He rose unsteadily, swaying slightly as he found his balance. Everybody needs to hear this. Noble glanced at me with obvious concern. The Sherwoods had gone completely still. Wilma clutched her napkin like a lifeline. Around the restaurant, other patrons began turning toward our table, sensing impending drama. To Rupert Hansen! Olan raised his glass high, voice booming across the intimate space. The most dedicated father-in-law a guy could ask for. His pause before dedicated carried unmistakable sarcasm. I remained seated, hands folded calmly in my lap, watching him build toward whatever verbal assault he'd been planning. I mean, here's a guy who really knows how to stretch a dollar, you know? Takes real skill to live like this when you're basically... Another strategic pause. Financially challenged. Gasps rippled around our table. Alma's mouth fell open. Harold Sherwood's face flushed with secondhand embarrassment. This wasn't family humor. It was calculated public humiliation. Olan, Effie half stood, tugging at his jacket. That's enough. Sit down. He brushed her off dismissively. Relax, honey. Just sharing some family wisdom here. Tyler had materialized near our table, ready to intervene if the situation deteriorated further. Other staff members lingered nearby, uncertain how to handle a drunk guest's social destruction of a private celebration. See, Rupert here taught me something important. Olan's voice grew louder, ensuring maximum audience participation. He showed me how a man can keep up appearances even when he's living on credit cards and borrowed time. The insult hung in the air like poisonous smoke. Every guest at our table understood they were witnessing systematic character assassination disguised as tribute. My daughter's face had gone pale with shock and humiliation. That takes courage, right? To keep pretending you're successful when everyone knows you're just hanging on by a thread. Noble started to rise from his chair, but I caught his eye and shook my head slightly. This performance needed to reach its natural conclusion. Let Olan reveal his complete character to everyone who mattered. I mean, look around. He gestured broadly at the elegant restaurant. Pacific Edge, private dining room. You'd think this guy was loaded, but we all know the truth, don't we? His satisfied grin encompassed our entire table, seeking confirmation of shared understanding about my supposed poverty. The silence that followed was devastating. Not agreement, but stunned disapproval of his cruelty. "So here's to Rupert." He drained his wine glass completely. "A man who never lets financial reality get in the way of a good show." The toast concluded with theatrical flourish. Olan sat down heavily, clearly pleased with his public demolition of my dignity. Around the table, my guests stared at him with mixture of shock, disgust, and protective anger. Effie had tears in her eyes. "How could you say that? How could you—" "What? I'm just being honest." Olan shrugged with false innocence. "Families shouldn't have secrets, right?" The restaurant had grown quieter, other diners obviously listening to our table's drama. Tyler stood frozen nearby, uncertain whether to intervene or retreat. The evening's social fabric had been shredded beyond repair. But I remained perfectly calm, studying my son-in-law with analytical precision. He'd just provided conclusive evidence of his character to 8 witnesses, destroying any remaining sympathy for his position in our family conflict. Exactly what I'd hoped would happen. "Thank you for those illuminating words," I said quietly, my voice carrying clearly in the stunned silence. Very revealing indeed. Something in my tone made him look at me more carefully, but the alcohol prevented full comprehension. He'd just walked directly into the trap I'd spent 2 weeks preparing. Time for the final act. Dessert plates had been cleared away when I caught Tyler's attention with a subtle gesture. The meal was concluding naturally, guests checking watches and gathering purses, the social energy drained by hours of uncomfortable family theater. Tyler approached our table with practiced discretion, leather portfolio in hand. "Whenever you're ready, Mr. Hansen." The bill presentation followed normal restaurant protocol, but Olan's attention sharpened immediately. He'd been waiting for this moment all evening, the final opportunity to expose my supposed financial inadequacy to our gathered witnesses. "Oh, this should be interesting." He leaned back in his chair with satisfied anticipation. "Let's see how the old man handles the damage." Around the table, my guests shifted uncomfortably. They'd witnessed enough humiliation for one evening, and clearly hoped to escape without further family destruction. But Olan wasn't finished with his dominance display. I reached for my wallet with steady hands, no tremor or hesitation despite the evening's accumulated stress. The leather felt familiar and reassuring, filled with the practical tools of financial independence that Olan assumed didn't exist. "Seriously though, Rupert," his voice carried across the table with malicious curiosity. "Where exactly did you get money for tonight? Another credit card? Maybe hit up Effie for a loan?" The insult struck its intended target. My daughter flinched visibly, her face burning with fresh shame at her husband's relentless cruelty. She knew the truth about my financial situation, which made his public lies even more devastating. "I mean, we're talking about what here?" Olan gestured around the elegant dining room. $200-300 minimum. That's serious money for someone living on Social Security." Noble's jaw tightened dangerously. The Sherwoods exchanged glances that could have melted steel. Even Wilma looked ready to defend my honor against this systematic character assassination. But I remained silent, letting him build toward his crescendo. Every word was being cataloged by witnesses who would remember this evening for years. The contrast between his crude assumptions and the approaching reality would be devastating. "Come on, be honest with us." Olan's grin widened with predatory satisfaction. "Did you really think you could pull off this fancy dinner charade? Make everyone forget you're basically broke?" Tyler stood patiently beside our table, professional composure intact, despite obvious discomfort with the family drama unfolding before him. He understood something important was happening, even if the full context remained unclear. I withdrew my Platinum American Express card with deliberate calm, the metal catching the restaurant's ambient lighting. The card's substantial weight felt satisfying in my fingers, tangible proof of financial capabilities that Olan couldn't imagine. "Actually," I said quietly, placing the card in Tyler's waiting hand, "I think you'll find my resources are quite adequate." For the first time all evening, uncertainty flickered in Olan's expression. The platinum card represented credit levels far beyond normal reach, but his intoxicated confidence prevented full comprehension of its implications. "Big shot credit card, huh?" He forced another laugh. "Hope it doesn't get declined. That would be embarrassing." Tyler accepted the card with particular care, his movements suggesting recognition of its significance. As Jim Morrison's son, he'd grown up around Seattle's banking community. He understood exactly what platinum-level credit meant about someone's financial standing. "I'll process this right away," Tyler said formally, heading toward the payment station with measured steps. Olan watched him go, still smiling with anticipated triumph. He expected public humiliation when the card was rejected, vindication of every lie he'd spread about my poverty and desperation. The irony was perfect. He had no idea what was actually about to happen. Around the table, my guests waited in tense silence, uncertain whether they were about to witness my final embarrassment or something entirely different. The evening had delivered so many uncomfortable surprises that anything seemed possible, but I knew exactly what Tyler would discover when he ran my card through their system. Information that would transform this entire confrontation in ways Olan couldn't possibly anticipate. The trap was finally ready to spring. Tyler returned from the payment station with reluctant steps, his professional composure cracking around the edges. The platinum card sat awkwardly in his palm, like evidence of embarrassment he'd rather not deliver. "I'm sorry, Mr. Hansen." His voice carried genuine regret. The payment was declined. Silence crashed over our table like a physical force. Wine glasses froze halfway to lips. Conversations died mid-sentence. Even the ambient restaurant noise seemed to diminish, as if the entire establishment was holding its breath. Olan's reaction was immediate and explosive. His face transformed from casual interest to barely contained euphoria, eyes lighting up with the satisfaction of ultimate vindication. He'd been waiting for this moment all evening, proof positive that his poor father-in-law narrative was completely accurate. Well, well, well. He leaned back in his chair with theatrical surprise. "What do you know about that?" Around the table, my guests exchanged glances of pure mortification. Wilma's hand flew to her chest. Noble's jaw tightened with protective anger. The Sherwoods stared at their plates, unable to witness my public humiliation directly. "Don't worry about it, Dad." Olan's voice boomed across the dining room, ensuring maximum audience for my embarrassment. "These things happen when you're living beyond your means." Effie's face had gone completely white. She seemed to shrink into her chair, desperately wishing she could disappear entirely. This was her worst nightmare, her husband's cruelty on full public display with her father as victim. "I can cover this, no problem." Olan reached for his wallet with exaggerated generosity. "What's a few $100 between family, right?" The offer dripped with calculated malice. He was positioning himself as the successful provider, rescuing his pathetic father-in-law from financial catastrophe. Every word was designed to maximize my humiliation while establishing his superior position. Tyler shifted uncomfortably, still holding my declined card. Something in his expression suggested internal conflict, professional obligation warring against personal loyalty. He kept glancing between the card and my face, as if searching for guidance about how to proceed. "Really, Rupert, you should have just asked." Olan's false concern was masterful theater. I mean, Pacific Edge, private dining room, that's serious money for someone on a fixed income. Other restaurant patrons had begun to notice our table's drama. Whispered conversations carried fragments of speculation about the old man who can't afford dinner, and the generous son-in-law saving the situation. But something strange was happening. Despite the apparent devastation of my position, I felt oddly calm, almost satisfied. The pieces of my strategy had fallen into place exactly as intended. Olan had revealed his complete character to every witness who mattered. "The thing is," Olan continued, warming to his theme, "pride goes before a fall, you know? Sometimes you just gotta accept help from people who actually have their finances together." Noble started to rise from his chair, clearly ready to defend my honor, but I caught his eye and shook my head slightly. Not yet. This performance needed to reach its natural conclusion. Tyler was sweating now, clutching my card with obvious distress. His professional training demanded he handle payment issues discreetly, but watching a respected family friend endure public mockery was clearly testing his ethical limits. "Seriously, Dad, I'm happy to take care of tonight." Olan's magnanimous gesture encompassed the entire elegant dining room. "Consider it my treat. Early Father's Day gift." The irony was perfect. He had no idea what was about to happen. I looked at Tyler, seeing the moral struggle playing out in his young face. the son of Jim Morrison, raised to respect older businessmen who'd helped build Seattle's financial community. He knew something the rest of the table didn't, and his patience with injustice was clearly reaching its breaking point. Tyler's internal struggle finally reached its breaking point. I watched him straighten his spine, his professional restraint cracking like ice under pressure. The moral weight of watching injustice unfold had become unbearable. "Actually, Mr. Hansen," Tyler's voice cut through Olan's self-satisfied monologue with unexpected authority, "there's been a misunderstanding." The dining room grew quieter. Something in Tyler's tone commanded attention. No longer the polite young server, but a man with important information to deliver. "You see," Tyler continued, his voice carrying clearly across our table and beyond, "we are the ones who owe you money." Olan's smug expression flickered with confusion. "What are you talking about, kid?" Tyler took a deep breath, glancing around the restaurant as if ensuring maximum audience for what came next. "The Pacific Edge restaurant owes Mr. Hansen $1 million from the reconstruction loan he provided last year." The words hit like a physical explosion. Olan's wine glass slipped from suddenly nerveless fingers, crystal shattering against the hardwood floor, with a sound like breaking bells. The sharp crash echoed through the dining room's stunned silence. "We actually wanted to suggest deducting tonight's dinner from our debt to him," Tyler continued, his voice growing stronger with each word. "The card was declined because the payment system couldn't process a transaction from someone we already owe such a significant amount." Complete silence engulfed the restaurant. Every conversation had stopped. Servers stood frozen mid-step. Other diners stared openly at our table, trying to process the dramatic reversal they'd just witnessed. Olan sat motionless, staring at the broken glass fragments scattered around his feet like pieces of his shattered worldview. His face cycled through confusion, realization, and something approaching horror as the full magnitude of his mistake became clear. Noble's mouth had fallen open. Wilma looked ready to faint. The Sherwoods were gripping each other's hands in amazement. Around the dining room, whispered conversations began buzzing with excitement about the dramatic turn of events. "$1 million?" Effie whispered, her voice barely audible. Tyler nodded respectfully toward me. "Mr. Hansen financed our complete renovation after the fire damage. Without his investment, Pacific Edge wouldn't exist today." The revelation continued, rippling through the restaurant like earthquake aftershocks. Other patrons were openly staring now, recognizing they'd witnessed something extraordinary, a complete reversal of fortune that seemed almost too dramatic for real life. Olan remained frozen, his earlier triumph transformed into devastating comprehension. The poor old man he'd been mocking was actually a millionaire. The financially struggling father-in-law was one of Seattle's significant investors. Every insult, every condescending comment, every cruel assumption had been spectacularly wrong. The broken wine glass caught the restaurant's soft lighting, fragments glittering like fallen stars on the dark floor. Perfect metaphor for Olan's demolished confidence and shattered illusions about reality. Tyler placed my platinum card carefully on the table. "Of course, there's no charge for tonight's dinner, Mr. Hansen. Consider it our small token of appreciation for your continued support." The gesture was simple but powerful. Respect restored, dignity vindicated, truth triumphant over lies and manipulation. Around us, the restaurant slowly came back to life. Conversations resumed with excited undertones about the drama they'd witnessed. Staff moved to clean up the broken glass while shooting respectful glances toward our table, but Olan still sat in stunned silence, staring at the crystal fragments as if they held answers to questions he was only now beginning to understand. The revenge was complete, not through cruelty or public shaming, but through the simple revelation of truth. Sometimes justice required nothing more than letting reality speak for itself. The broken glass had been swept away, but the evening's transformation lingered in the restaurant's charged atmosphere. Whispered conversations carried notes of amazement and respect. Staff moved with newfound deference, treating our table like visiting dignitaries rather than problem customers. Effie was the first to break our table's stunned silence. She rose slowly, her chair scraping softly against polished hardwood, and moved around the table toward me, with tears streaming down her face. "Dad," her voice broke on the single word. "I'm so sorry. I didn't know. Why didn't you ever tell us?" I stood to meet her embrace, feeling months of tension dissolve in that moment of reconnection. My daughter's arms wrapped around me with desperate affection, as if trying to make up for weeks of avoided calls and family distance. "Sweetheart, I never like to boast." I held her gently, speaking loud enough for the table to hear. "Real strength doesn't need publicity. I wanted to be loved for who I am, not what I have." Noble was beaming with protective pride. "That's the Rupert Hansen I remember from our banking days. Always preferred letting his work speak for itself." Wilma dabbed at her eyes with her napkin. All those stories about financial troubles. How could we have believed such nonsense? The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Olan had worked so hard to convince the neighborhood of my poverty that even well-meaning friends had begun to worry about my circumstances. His lies had been so persistent, so detailed, that they'd created their own false reality. "I helped Pacific Edge because this community matters to me," I explained, still holding Effie close. "When the fire damaged their kitchen, I saw young families losing their gathering place. Sometimes investment isn't about profit, it's about preserving what brings people together." Tyler approached our table with genuine gratitude. "My father always said you saw potential where others saw problems. That loan saved not just our business, but 15 jobs and a neighborhood institution." Across the table, Olan remained silent, staring at his hands. The magnitude of his miscalculations was still sinking in. He'd spent months building a narrative of superiority based on completely false assumptions about my character and circumstances. Effie pulled back from our embrace, her eyes red but clearing. "I knew about the loan, Dad. I helped you review the paperwork, remember? But Olan was so convinced you were struggling that I didn't know how to tell him without seeming like I was taking sides." The confession revealed another layer of family complexity. She'd been protecting both men from uncomfortable truths, hoping to maintain peace while watching her husband systematically destroy my reputation with lies. "You were trying to keep the family together," I said gently. "That's not wrong, sweetheart. But sometimes truth serves relationships better than silence." Around the restaurant, other diners had resumed their meals with occasional glances toward our table. The drama was concluding, but the respect in their expressions suggested this evening would be remembered and discussed for weeks to come. Olan finally spoke, his voice barely audible. "I don't understand. If you had all this money, why did you let me—" He couldn't finish the question, but we all understood. Why had I allowed him to spread lies about my poverty? Why hadn't I corrected his assumptions? Why had I endured months of disrespect without defending myself? "Because character reveals itself through crisis," I answered quietly. "I needed to understand who you really were before deciding how to proceed with our family relationship." The words weren't cruel, just honest. Strategic patience had allowed everyone to show their true nature. Olan's insecurity and aggression, Effie's torn loyalties, the neighbor's capacity for both gossip and genuine concern. "Will you ever forgive me?" Effie whispered, fresh tears starting. "Already have," I assured her. "Family means loving people despite their mistakes. That includes both of us learning from tonight." Tyler discreetly placed the check presenter on the table, empty except for a handwritten note. "Dinner compliments of Pacific Edge, with gratitude for your continued friendship." As we prepared to leave, I noticed Olan still sitting quietly, processing the evening's revelations. His worldview had been completely overturned, his assumptions shattered, his pride humbled. But perhaps that destruction could lead to something better. Real relationships, after all, require truth as their foundation. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.